Welcome to Tuesday Notary Titans. Today is July 22nd, another fabulous Tuesday. I am Jen Neitzel, your co-host for today, and I have a very special co-host with me today, the one and only legend himself, Matt Miller with the California League of Independent Notaries. Matt, say good afternoon and tell us a little bit about yourself for those who may not yet know.
Sure. Thanks, Jen, and welcome everyone. Again, my name is Matt Miller, president of the California League of Independent Notaries. We are an advocacy group that strives to make notaries' voices heard on policy changes that affect you and your business. I'm also a very busy mobile notary, just like you, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and co-author of the best-selling Apostille Agent Survival Guide. You can find that on Amazon.com. Happy to be here today.
Thank you so much for co-hosting with me today, Matt. Just so you guys know, Laura is in court today. She was called in as a witness, so she is in court today, and so she was unable to join us for TNT, but she wanted me to pass along her very best wishes to everybody. She hates missing this call. So I am so excited that you guys are all here today. We're going to start the way we always do, and that is explaining what this call is. It's like an old-fashioned radio call-in show, and we are here to answer all of your notary questions. So if you have any questions for Matt or myself, all you have to do is raise your virtual hand to get in line, and you will find that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. There should be a raised hand function there. So while you guys are getting your questions together and getting in line, we are going to start with a couple of announcements. The first one is a new feature that we have for TNT, and that is a way to submit questions to us during the week. So you don't have to try and remember it for Tuesday. All you have to do is visit notarycoach.com/TNT, and you will be able to submit your questions on a Google form. And please note, these questions are not going to be these are not going to be answered right away. These are just for this call. So please don't use that form as a way to, if you have an urgent need. That's what the National Notary Association hotline is for. And that right there is worth the price of membership. So if you're not a member of the National Notary Association, I encourage you to join because that hotline is gold. Okay. I also want to tell you a special announcement. And we're supposed to start next week. I know how these things run. We're going to run into a problem. We're going to think of something. We're going to want to switch and change the date, but we are looking at going live on YouTube for the future of TNT. So be on the lookout for some information about that and how you can join us moving forward on TNT beginning July 30th on YouTube. It's going to help bring us in a bigger audience, more questions, because the more questions we have, guess what? The more we learn. Okay, guys, who has some questions for me today? Who wants to raise their hand? I haven't even opened the chat box, but I would really prefer if you guys are able to ask us questions to do it with your raising your virtual hand and asking us. Who's got a question for us? Hi, Dan. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Quick question. In California, and at the bottom of the notarial acts, there'll be a total number of pages, total number of documents. So does that include all, let's say, travel documents in addition to the notarial act that I've just attached? So that would make it a total of 3 documents, or actually 2 documents, including the acknowledgement that I've attached, or is it just one?
That is a Matt Miller question if I have ever heard one. Matt?
Thanks, Jen, and great question, Dan. So it sounds like you have 3 separate documents. Let's just say we'll call them, for example, a power of attorney, a healthcare directive, and a trust document. And each one of those would likely have a signature page and perhaps call for an acknowledgement which you are attaching, and you're asking about the additional information section at the bottom of the certificate where it asks for document date, signers, names, titles, title of the document, that sort of information. And there is typically a box for page count. The best practice for that would be to count the number of pages in the document that you're attaching it to and +1 for your certificate. So if the document is pages 1 through 10 and I'm attaching a loose leaf certificate, that's now an 11-page document. Does that make sense?
It does now. Thank you.
Great. You're welcome. Thanks for coming up.
And Matt, that is exactly why you're here, because you know all that technical stuff right off the top of your head. I love it. Who else has a question for us this afternoon, guys? Got another quiet crowd today, Matt. Maybe we've just taught them everything they need to know, right? Hey, Celicia in Florida.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. So,
Hey.
Matt, are you talking about the optional part on the bottom of the NNA certificate? Or is it
Yeah,
just
the NNA
California only?
Yeah, the NNA certificate typically has an additional info or optional info box at the bottom or to the side. And then,
Okay,
you know,
so I want to challenge you on this just a little bit. So if it's a
okay.
4-page document, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's, we call it Matt's power of attorney to buy his Spanish villa.
Okay, great.
So Matt's power of attorney to buy his Spanish villa, it is a 4-page document. So I'm going to add that 1-page acknowledgement. So, but the document itself is a 4-page document, or is it now a 5-page document? That's what I want to, because I always think it goes like, what is the document? And so this one was a 4-pager.
It is rather confusing, but since you are adding a page to the document, that total document is all 4 pages plus the certificate. So now it's a 5-page document.
Okay, I have not been doing that because I have always thought that that was, how many pages is that document, the document itself? But you're saying because we're marrying that piece of paper together, that's why I call it marrying it.
Yep, it becomes part of the document now. Yep.
Got it.
And you know, if you have been only putting the actual page count of the document less your certificate, do not fret. It's not a deal breaker. All of that information at the bottom is just optional information. And the reason that that is there, for those who might be wondering why, is because it's fraud deterrence, right? You want to, as Celicia says, marry your loose leaf certificate to that document so that it couldn't be attached to something else after you leave. So that's why it's so important to indicate on your certificate some kind of identifier that matches it up with the document it's intended for.
Yeah, you don't want somebody to just, take your loose leaf certificate and go add it to something else.
Which
So
has
always
happened.
put some kind of descriptive, in the bottom, even though it says optional, it's Matt's power of attorney for his Spanish villa.
Super. I love it.
Matt
Thanks,
better have
Lisa.
a guest room for his friend Jen in his Spanish villa.
And his other friend, Jen, thank you very much. Yes, please. Get a
That's
Jen
right,
like
a
room.
Jen room. Yes, have a Jen
Jen room.
room. And I want you guys to look in the chat right now. This is the power of this call happening in real time. Matt is addressing something that we haven't talked about in a really long time. And look how many of us, myself included, I haven't put it in the chat, but I was not counting my certificate as part of the document package. So I want you to look and see the power in chat right now of TNT when you learn something new, and how many people, even people that are, experts, which I don't ever consider myself an expert. I have expertise, but I'm not an expert at anything, just enough to be dangerous in a lot of things. So, but that's the power of a call like this. And so I want to thank you, Mr. Lopez, for answering that question, because you did the heavy lifting and helped out so many people on this call.
You're welcome. And the reason why I asked that is because I would often leave that area just blank because I didn't know. Matt, is that valid to leave that area blank?
It is optional.
It is optional,
Yeah.
but best practice, you should put some kind of identifiers in there so that your certificate could not be used maliciously on something else.
Agreed.
Yep. And it just amazes me how many times people think that this job of being a notary is so simple, so easy, just stamp and sign. And nothing could be further from the truth, as we all know, which is why we gather here every Tuesday, right, Matt?
Right. Because no matter how long you've been a notary, if you walk away with one thing, you're better reason for you to. I don't know.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Okay, Will Hart, who, by the way, Will, I sent you an email a couple weeks ago, and I haven't heard back from you.
Did you send me an email? Oh, I
I
will go back. I will
did.
go and take a look at that. And
I
find
did. It came from Marketing for Notaries, so maybe check your spam. But what
Okay.
is your question for us? And remind us where you are calling in from.
I'm in Fairfield, California.
Okay, what can we do for you?
So I'm going through a situation right now. Last night, I notarized a HELOC for a couple. And this morning, I realized that I had on the jurat, so they each had a jurat, and I used the California jurat, and I put both couples' names on each jurat. And so my question is, and I called the client this morning around 7:30 and realized, and they mailed it off. So I'm wondering, in a situation like that, what are some things that might happen, and what is there anything I can do to rectify it?
Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify, it's one single document, but there's two signers, and you intended to use a jurat for each signer, but inadvertently put both names like signer A and signer B on both jurats. Okay, great.
Exactly.
So for those on the call that may not know, it is okay to use one certificate for two different signers on the same document, or three or four, if you can fit all their names in that line without crowding it or making it ineligible. Or it's also okay to use one certificate for each signer. In this case, let me ask the clarifying question. Well, was there any kind of indicators on the certificate that match it up to the intended document? Did you write any additional info at the bottom?
No, I did not.
Okay, so I don't think that this is going to cause any issues. What will happen is the title company will probably just shred one of those, because there's not, you don't necessarily need two of them. But in the future, I would say, just remind you that it's okay to put two people on the same certificate, and make sure you're putting some indicators on that certificate, matching it up with the document that it's intended for. Does that help?
So are you saying indicators? So in the optional section, what could I put in there?
So in my everyday practice, I usually put three minimum indicators. I'll put the title of the document. I'll put the date, the signer's date, if it's dated. And then I'll put the signers' names and maybe their capacity. Are they signing as an individual? Are they signing as a manager of the company? Something like that. So whatever they claim to be. And then also a page count, including your certificate. That way, that certificate couldn't end up on something else that you didn't intend it.
Okay. So even though it says that in the optional box, signers other than named above, you'll still put their names on that line?
So the box labeled signers other than named above would be appropriate for a document witness.
Okay.
Because they're not a signer of the document, they are a document witness. There should be two spaces at the bottom for signers, name, and capacity. Do you see that?
Oh, in above the optional box.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
definitely. Yep.
But there also should be a space down at the bottom for signers. And then there is usually a box that says signers other than named above. So that would be other than the signatures that you are notarizing. So that's why I always use that for a document witness.
Okay. Okay. So it's possible that the jurats that I added to their HELOC are usable. Like
Oh yeah, I'm
they
sure
may
that.
not need to redo it.
Oh yeah, I don't think that it's going to affect your notarization in any way. I think the certificate is valid, but you probably didn't need two of them because it's just for one document.
Okay.
Yeah, because you put signer A and signer B in the certificate.
Okay,
The solution there is for wills to advise the title company is to shred one of the jurats, since both people were mentioned on one jurat. Does that make
okay.
sense, Will?
Yeah, that makes sense. So I need to ask the client to put me in touch with her title company?
Was it on the instructions that you received from the signing service for the HELOC?
No, the client mailed the documents to.
It was a mail away.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Then I personally would follow through with that. I mean, I would hope that they would know, but personally, I would follow up with that. Matt, what do you say about that?
Yeah, if you have a way to contact the receiving party, the title company, it doesn't hurt to reach out to them and say, I included an extra certificate on whatever document it was, which is not necessary because I included both names on the same certificate. That way they know that there's an extra page in there to watch out for and ultimately get rid of.
Okay.
It's a fraud, and you could present it for fraud to deter fraud, possible fraud, to get rid of that second one.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's very helpful and comforting because that's different than what I got from the NNA. So thank you.
Yeah, the NNA is always going to side on the, air of caution.
Sure.
And that's great, but there's also real world practice as well.
Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And we'll go check for that email. It came
will.
from Marketing for Notaries. It might be in your spam.
I will go check it. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks for your question too. Kalia, how are you doing today? Tell us where you're calling from and what your question is.
Hi, I'm well. How are you?
I'm fabulous. What can we do for you today?
So I had a couple of questions. It's interesting. I came right in as you guys were talking about loose certs. I guess you kind of answered that one as far as like language to add to just make sure that I was just recording a deed for a client and it got rejected because my stamp was horizontal. Like my loose cert was horizontal and it needed to be like letter and it needed to be like facing like letterhead, like regular, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it got rejected. So I was
wait,
going to ask the question.
Wait a minute, your stamp or your certificate?
The certificate.
Okay, so you just printed it out landscape instead of vertical.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And it got rejected, but that led me to like taking another look at it, and I realized that it doesn't have any language to tie it specifically to this document. It was just like something standard. So I wanted to know what language can I add to like a template to make sure that I can identify, once it becomes separate or if it becomes separated, they can still attach it to the appropriate document.
So that's a great question. Matt, how do you do that? And then I'll share how I do it.
If it comes with the document, even though your certificate might be a separate page all its own behind the signature page, if there is a page number at the bottom, then it's obvious that it belongs with the document. But if I'm adding a certificate out of my own bag because the one presented is not compliant or whatever reason, then at the bottom under the optional info, or if you don't have an optional info section, just at the bottom, you can write the title of the document, always the title of the document, the page count, including your certificate, the date the signers dated, if they dated, and then I write the signers' names and then their capacity, whether that's assigning as individual, as a trustee, as a CEO, manager, whatever they claim, I will include that info at the bottom. And then also, always on the signature page, you're going to write, see attached California Government Code compliant notary certificate or something to that effect, so that the receiving party knows, hey, I should be looking for a notary certificate that goes with this.
Got it.
Well, I do not have a different answer at all from Matt. That's exactly what I do. The thing I have differently than Matt is I created a stamp that said, I'm in Texas, you know, see attached certificate, set Texas certificate. So just so that I could stamp that, and, you know, it's just a little time saving thing for
Yeah.
me. So
Got
did
you.
does that answer your question, Kalia, or did you have another one for us?
It does answer my question, and I have another one for you.
Okay.
I literally, in the same appointment, I just met a seller. So I'm also in real estate. So I just met someone who owns a ton of property, and he needed help drafting a new deed, which I don't do personally. I know we're not allowed to draft the deeds. I partner with a title company, but I'm able to help him in that way. So I started talking to him, and he said that he buys the properties from sheriff sales. He gets them in someone else's name, and then he gets power of attorney over that person. And so when he's ready to sign or ready to sell, he signs on behalf of that person because he has power of attorney over that person. So in the real estate world, from a real estate perspective, from a title insurance perspective, that is absolutely not something that they will want to do. They will literally, like, I've gone to jails to have people sign a deed, because if you have a post, they typically want you to sign, even if someone has power of attorney over you. So I was just wondering, like, how, like, from a notary perspective, who may not have that knowledge about real estate, would they go along with that? Like, because someone is helping him sign these deeds. Like, he's saying, like, I own 80 something properties. Like, I do this all the time. So obviously a notary is stamping on behalf of this, and he's signing on behalf of someone else. So I'm just wondering, like, is that something that a notary should take if they say, well, I have power of attorney over this person? By the way, the power of attorney document was like a handwritten note that was notarized. Yeah. And so
Getting
if
red
they're saying,
flags
like, yes,
all over the place.
I have power of attorney, would a notary accept that and say, okay, you can sign on behalf of this person without this person being there?
So I don't, and where are you calling from, Kalia? What state are you in?
Pennsylvania, I'm in Philadelphia.
So I don't know if this is national practice, and Matt, I know you've got something to say about this too. I don't know if this is national practice or not when it comes to real estate, but I do know here in Texas, where I live, if someone is signing for a POA, the title company is contacting the person who issued the POA to make sure if
This is
there's
outside of a title company. So a title company wise, I already know they would reject it. They would make the person sign.
okay.
They would find that person, send a notary to them, and make them sign. But anybody can draft a deed
Yeah, oh
and
yeah, yeah,
add
yeah.
someone to a deed and sign it over. So this guy is doing a lot of things off market outside of a title company. So this is just a power of attorney that he has, a deed that he has. It's not through a title company. He's just showing up and saying, hey, I have power of attorney over this person. It's notarized, and I want to sign this deed on behalf of this person.
That to me reeks of fraud. Matt?
Yeah, this is the recipe for lawsuits. In fact,
Yeah.
there are multiple lawsuits that sound just like this going on right now. So, yeah, I mean, he self-prepared a deed. He's going to sign it. He wants it notarized. He has a non-statutory power of attorney that he's presented to you, a handwritten letter, which may or may not stand up in court, but that's not our problem. I think that in this particular instance, it is okay to invoke your right to refuse because you are not comfortable with what you've been presented with. You have reasonable belief that there may be fraud occurring, and you can just leave it right at that. You don't have to proceed, go past go, collect $200, nothing. You may refuse if you have reasonable belief, which means a reasonable person would be convinced that there might be fraud going on.
Okay.
Yeah, and Kalia, I would stay as far away from that guy as you could because there are so many people out there right now that are doing this sort of business and literally taking property away from people, you know, coming up. There was a story not long ago, I think it was California, maybe it was Florida, where this couple I mean, they were basically kicked out of their home
Florida.
It was sold out
Yeah.
from underneath them. So that's what this, it sounds to me like that's what this guy is doing. He's selling properties out from underneath unsuspecting people, which is a total shame. So yeah, I would run as far away from this guy as you possibly could. And if there's, I don't know, is there a way to report something like that, Matt? I guess the police?
Yeah. I mean, and to further your point, deed fraud across the country is, and I'm not using this word hyperbolically at all. It is literally exploding across the country. And you would want to report something like this if you know for sure fraud is going on to your local authorities. They are enforcement, they can follow up on this. Or your state's attorney general's office also might be interested in your report. So those are the two agencies I would reach out to.
Okay. So I guess I was just going to say, like, I just wanted to know in general, is that something that would be acceptable? If someone said, I have power of attorney over this person, presents power of attorney, even if it's a legitimate typed up document, is that would a notary be able to proceed in that situation?
Yes, if I was presented with a deed that someone is signing power of attorney on that has been pre-approved by the lender and or the title company, and asked for to ask not for a copy, but just to see the power of attorney, then yes, by all means, I would proceed. Everything would appear to be legal and good to go forth with. But the fact that this is outside of escrow, that the power of attorney is not statutory compliant, the deed is self-prepared, it just is too much of a hot button for me to proceed on something like that.
Gotcha.
But I have done, in my experience, multiple real estate closings that involved a power of attorney.
But it was through an escrow service, you're saying?
Absolutely.
Well, that's different because they're doing their due diligence. So like, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you talking about, I just want to clarify your question too, a little bit clear. Are you talking about like in a general notary signing, if someone were to hand you a power of attorney, is that, or are you just real estate?
I'm thinking just real estate because I'm in a real estate world and that's where it applies to. And like specifically, like if it was just another document, I probably wouldn't question it as much. But because it's a deed, I'm like, okay, like do notaries normally accept a power of attorney for a deed?
In my experience, and I think what Matt is saying as well, is that it's all of those powers of attorney have been pre-approved by the legal department with the escrow company that is facilitating the signing. So anything outside of that, I'm not sure I would be comfortable just accepting a POA that, outside of escrow like that, because you have no idea unless you make contact or that person.
Right. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does.
Awesome. And do you have any others for us?
No, I think I'm good at the moment.
Awesome. All right, Kalia, thank you.
That was a really good one. Thanks for coming up.
That was very thought-provoking. Thank you for that, Kalia.
When I say I'm in a car and I just left there, I literally just left there and was like, okay, yeah, the notary coaching call is on now. Like, let me ask him this question now. I literally just met him like a few minutes ago. Yeah.
It sounds like he's up to no good to me, but you have more information than we do on it. So.
Yeah. But thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Kalia. I appreciate you bringing that up today. Joanne, your hand just went down. I was just getting ready to call on you. Did we answer your question or do you have one for us?
Yeah, I guess I have one. I mean, I kind of double think. Kind of, but I'll ask it anyway. Okay. So question on when it comes to like divorce paperwork or maybe petition for legal separation. Like when the respondent, the other party is, emotional and I don't know, I guess the definition of duress, but, just it's a bad situation. And for here in Washington, it's the respondent does not have to sign, but in that case where the respondent is there, and again, they're just so emotional and distraught. I mean, like, how does that play out in terms of our job in determining like, okay, is this person mentally, should sign or able to sign? You know what I mean? kind of like in the hospital determining, okay, are they competent enough?
So do you remember Laura's 4 questions about determining competency?
The orientation times 4, yeah.
Yeah. So that would be my go-to, and just asking, you know, do you know what you're signing? Do you know, because it could be coming through tears. But how do you know those tears aren't, it's a divorce decree. How do you know those tears aren't of joy too? I mean, it could be that as well. I hate to say it.
Could be.
From someone who's been divorced before. It might have just been tears of joy.
Understood. Yeah.
Matt, what do you say?
Yeah, I would, you know, obviously determine competency, and in this particular case, it sounds like capacity was there. It sounds like what might have been the concern is the difference between distraught and duress, and those are mutually exclusive. Duress means you are signing not under your own free will. Someone is forcing, coercing, or somehow antagonizing you to sign against your own free will. Distraught, well, you know, the divorce might be hard for that person. Yeah. And, you know, just because they're distraught doesn't necessarily mean that they're under duress. So I hope that helps to delineate the two.
Does that help, Joanne?
It does. It's just, that's such a fine line, you know?
And that's a hard situation to walk into. You're there for just a couple of minutes. There's a lot of emotion, you know, I'm sure you don't know the backstory, right? But you can feel it all. So yeah, that's a toughie to walk into. But I think just going back to your basics, Joanne, about determining capacity, is what's going to help you determine or move past that fine line of confusion.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, the lady was two-ish, but I asked her 3 times, like, well, as a third party, you know, I have to ask you. So yeah, I made sure to ask and note the journal. Like, I asked the lady 3 times. She was just two-ish. So I guess distraught would be
That's
the
unfortunate. Thing. Yeah, that's unfortunate. And I'm sorry you had to go through that. And it's never any fun. I mean, that's what, you know, we say. We see notaries on our, we see customers on our best day, on their best days. I can't talk today. We see customers on their best days and their worst days.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's one of those worst days for some people.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joanne, for asking that question. Jen Cooper, you're asking for somebody in the chat?
We've got 2 chat questions for you. Awesome. One is from Shelly, and she's asking if the page count map is an optional area and was entered incorrectly, will that make the certificate invalid?
Good question. And the answer is no. Anything below the optional info line does not affect the notarization. So can you put 3, but you meant 4, strike it, put 4 initial? Sure, you can correct an initial. It's not going to affect the notarization. Now, okay. I will give California notaries a little inside tip who are sending things to the Secretary of State's office for apostille. If you are submitting something for apostille and you made a correction in the optional info section, they will reject it because they want clean certificates. But in the real world, when it comes down to nuts and bolts and court cases, that does not affect the notarization.
Does that answer your question?
I was going to ask, yeah, I'm sure it did. And I was going to ask for Linda Seymour, but she raised her hand so she can ask her question.
Oh, thanks, fabulous. Awesome. Well, let's get with Dean's question first. Dean, tell us where you're calling from and what your question is.
I'm calling from Charlotte, North Carolina. And my question is related to, it was a bizarre scenario right from the very beginning. This is a roller coaster ride. So everybody just hop on and see if you can stay with me.
All right,
I had a gentleman call me and say that his sister's parents were in the country with their daughter. That would make me think that would be his sister's sister, but it gets worse. So the sister's parents were in the country with their daughter, and they wanted their daughter to be in school here in the U.S. So they were going to give over power of attorney to him and his sister. And they had a form that they had drawn up, but they did not want to use the form from the local school. The lawyers actually have one for this very instance. They drew their own up and did not want to use the one from school. They drew theirs and wanted to bring it to me. I asked, why are you not using the form from school, which is drawn up and is, you know, part of the whole process when things like this go? And they said they did not like the way the form was worded. I rejected, or not rejected, I declined to participate in that notarization. And I asked them to go back to the school and see if the school, you know, was going to accept that document. I was uncomfortable when I know I've done it before with that same exact document. Was I right to decline that? And I'll ask maybe a little further side of this. With the idea of human trafficking going on, it seems like to me that this could have been very fraudulent, especially since it's a young girl that you would normally think is actually the sister of the sister, right? If it's the parent's daughter. Now, granted, there could be, it could be stepsister, it could be half sister, it could be other things, but why did he not refer to the girl as his wife's stepsister, half sister, or sister? So, again, was I correct in rejecting or declining that opportunity to notarize for them?
So, Dean, I am just going to tell you and everybody else on the call, I'm going to refer back to what Matt said earlier. If you feel like something fraudulent is going on, and that's what your gut was telling you, Dean, then you are allowed to deny that particular notarization. And if you, I mean, if you're getting sex trafficking, human trafficking vibes from somebody like that, that's not something that's just pops in your head for no reason, you know? I
Right.
mean, if that's the kind of thing that you're thinking, then you should absolutely be patting yourself on the back for not accepting that job. Matt, what do you say?
Yeah, I'm going to agree, Dean. I think your decision, and whatever your decision is the right decision because it's your decision to make.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to kind of talk this out a little bit. And, you know, if the document had been presented to you and it didn't have all of these red flags or vibes or points of concern for you, even if it's not the agency prescribed document, because remember, people are allowed to draw up their own legal documents for submission. It's on them if it's accepted or not. In that scenario, then it is okay to proceed with the notarization if they meet all the requirements for notarization, of course, even if it's not the document that you know the school has issued. Because when you start telling them, well, I'm not going to do this because it's not the right document, that starts getting into that unauthorized practice of law area, which you want to steer clear from.
Right.
But again, that's if everything was perfect, right?
Right. But I guess maybe my question, and I understand the, you know, not giving legal advice and so forth, but they told me in the beginning that there is an authorized form that is required to be used. They use the word required.
Mm-hmm.
If that form is what the school requires, I take it upon their word that that's the required form, right? So if that form, it obviously has all of the information that the school requires. If that document they're bringing to me and I'm notarizing it doesn't have all of those elements and components to it, I've now authorized a document or helped them do something, right?
No. People are allowed in the United States, people are allowed to decide to do the wrong thing or submit the wrong form, but it's not our place to make that decision for them.
Right. But I guess my question is this: if I signed that power of attorney and it wasn't going to for the purpose of the school, did I not just possibly allow this girl to be in the control of two other people? You know, what I'm saying is, to me, it seems like I should have been able to, and I know I can't, ask for birth certificates or, to prove that these are indeed the parents of this girl, to be able to do the power of attorney over to these other two people.
Okay.
I guess what I'm pointing out is it seems like the notary world is part of the problem of the human trafficking is what I'm kind of getting at, or could be.
I think that we're getting way off base here. Let's get back to basics, right? People are allowed to draw up and submit their own legal documents, even if it's not the document prescribed by the receiving agency. That's their decision to make. You can decide whether or not you want to notarize their signature on that document based on the situation you've been presented and if they meet all the requirements for notarization. In this particular situation, you felt that there might be some kind of fraud going on and you chose to deny notarization. That is perfectly fine. But let's say that all of those red flags and concerns weren't there. You should proceed with the notarization because whatever's in that document, you're not authorizing, you're not legalizing the document, you're not blessing the transaction. You are simply identifying the signer and watching them sign it if it's a jurat and notarizing their signature on that document. This is a big misconception amongst the public, is it's automatically assumed that we are notarizing a document. You're not. You're notarizing a signature on a document. And if you're in California, we have a boilerplate right across every one of our certificates that explains that in very clear detail. So don't ever feel like you are legalizing a document, because that's not what you're doing.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is they could have taken that power of attorney to somebody else, right? Because it's now notarized, and whoever's going to accept that power of attorney, that document has been notarized and those people are there. You see what I'm saying?
How they use that power of attorney is not up to you.
Yeah. It's up to the receiver to determine how they use and whether or not they accept that power of attorney. It's not up to us. That is what you're talking about, Dean, that next step, that next level you're talking about of concern is the unauthorized practice of law. And we don't make that determination. You did the right thing by following your gut. I will always stand behind that. If your gut's screaming, no, fraud, and today's like apparently fraud day on TNT, but then I stand behind you for declining the job. But what Matt is saying is it's not up to us to determine what people can do with the documents that we notarize. Does that make sense? I see where you're going. I see what you're saying, but that is way outside the notary's responsibility.
Like, for example, let's use like a DMV title, because I've had this happen before as well. Say there's, and I'll just use Jack Smith, okay? But there's a Jack Smith Sr. and a Jack Smith Jr. And the title is in Jack Smith with no junior or senior, but now Jack Jr. comes to me to sell this vehicle to somebody, and the name on the front matches his name. So he is now eligible, or could fraudulently take that title away from his father if he gets his hands on it, and go to a notary and do that.
He absolutely could. You're correct.
Okay, so all right.
When it comes to suffixes, though, this is something that notaries should be paying very close attention to and scrutinizing, ad nauseum, because that senior, junior, that's where the most fraud occurs, believe it or not.
And believe it or not, I rejected that signing because I was like, it says junior. Is there a senior? And, is he still with us? And, he says, well, it's just omitted. I was like, well, I hate to tell you, the name on the front has to match the name on the ID, and you have a junior at the end of yours, and there is no junior there. If you're a junior, that means there's a senior somewhere, and I do not feel comfortable notarizing this transfer of title. So you'll either need to go, to someone else and see if they'll do it for you, or, get the title in the right name.
And kudos to you, Dean, for sticking to your integrity.
Absolutely. It's not easy to do. You know, when you're like, oh, I'm rejecting, you're not just rejecting that notarization, you're rejecting the money that they were going to pay you for that, right? And it's frustrating, it's difficult. It's like, oh, I don't want to turn it away. But we have an office that we maintain, we have to maintain our integrity, and that's what you've done in these situations. It doesn't make it any easier.
Well, it makes it a little easier for me because I don't charge for general notary work. So, yeah, I do all mine with loan signings and estate signings. So my give back is free G&W. Nice.
I love that. What a great resource for your community. Thank you for bringing up that question today. Did we, I know it wasn't the answer you were looking for, but did we answer your question?
I still feel uneasy about the fact that and I have no problem, notarizing it if the red flags aren't there. It just seems like to me that we as notaries should be able to actually ask for supporting documentation. And I know we can, okay? But to me, it just seems like there should be a national law that says if somebody comes to you, they should be able to prove that they are indeed the parent of that child if they're giving that child's welfare over to somebody else. That it just seems like we should be able, when we do I-9s, we have to verify, other documentation. When they do loan signings, we have to verify that documentation. But yet we're in a situation. Sorry, it's trash day. I'm outside, so I'll go ahead and unmute. Thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a tough situation to be in because when you have to, like I said, you have to turn down that job. It's frustrating because another notary, certainly one that doesn't participate in weekly discussions like this. So nobody on TNT, but that some other notary out there is just going to stamp and sign it. And that's the really frustrating part. But thank you for bringing that up. A great discussion. Let's get to Linda for her question. Hi, Linda.
Hi, guys. How are y'all doing?
How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you. Quick question. I know this is kind of dumb and I can Google this, but somebody may elaborate on it. Since this is Fraud Tuesday, on the real estate, the deed of trust that we were talking about earlier, who do you report fraud like that to? Because I've actually been involved with that, but it didn't come to fruition that I signed it. So I didn't think anything about it. I didn't even know that was an alarm. So who would I call to say, hey, this might not be groovy?
I would contact, with your evidence, I would contact your local police department and let them guide you where you need to go with this. Matt, do you have any other advice?
Same. Make sure that you are thoroughly convinced, and you can call your local authorities, or you can also call your state AG's office and report possible fraud.
Yeah.
Who? Matt?
Attorney General.
Your Attorney General, AG's office.
Okay. It didn't really happen. It was just like a brush of that. It was just a mention of something like that. So call me if you need me. So I don't have any hard evidence, but I can say I've kind of come across that on one occasion, which is kind of spooky now that I realized what it was. So, okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Linda. Jen, do you have a question from chat? You're on mute, Jen. Look, she's turning into mini Laura.
Yeah, I am. From Adrienne, I can't say her last name, Arizona. She said, in Arizona, hybrid certs aren't allowed. I have been met with adversity from title when I ask, which would you like? I will then send one of each and let them decide. But recently I've encountered incomplete certs, no verbiage of acknowledgement or jurat. I was pulled off a signing for asking which to add a loose certificate. Seems like a disconnect not only with title but attorneys approving these, because escrow told me that this is how our attorneys do it. We both know attorneys are not up on notary law. I was told when I questioned, just stamp sign it. That was hard to read. What do you recommend?
Matt?
Never just stamp sign it.
Amen.
Because guess what? When your commission's on the line, those escrow officers and attorneys will, I promise you, be nowhere to be found. So make sure that you are sticking to your state's laws you are sticking to your integrity. And if you get removed from a job, I know that's tough, but you can always look back and say, I did the right thing. And the definition of integrity is doing the right thing when nobody else is watching.
That's right. And what the title office is not thinking about is if those documents somehow ever ended up in court or were challenged in any way, they will also be the first ones to throw you under the bus to say you didn't do it right. They're not going to sit there and go, well, I just told her to stamp and sign. So you need to make sure that you are looking out for yourself and always operating in integrity. Thank you, Jen Cooper. All right, Lupita.
Hi.
Hi, what's your question for us and where are you calling from?
I am calling from Florida. And my question is, when it comes to verifying identification, how deep do we go into the verifying that the identification is like not a fraud?
I think I'm confused on how deep you go.
Like, there's a lot of forgery happening.
Yeah.
And so I guess a lot of the states that, based on the state, there are some holograms or there's, they make their own little gadgets on it that make it authentic. How much do we go into before we accept that ID? I mean, I look at it and it looks good to me. It looks like mine and I see everything that's on mine and I just go on about my day. But I'm always worried, what if I am not being thorough enough? So how much is thorough enough?
Matt, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, good question. I've got a few suggestions, and I'll start with one that you kind of touched on a little bit, which is in your state as a notary, study your own ID backwards, forwards, up and down, front and back, and identify some things that you can use that would help you identify that it's a real government issued ID or not. So for example, in California, we've got holographs. You can hold it to the light. We've got a little braille bear that if you hold it to the light, you can see through, or you can feel it on your fingertips. And there are other things you look for, like the state seal and that sort of thing. So study your own state's ID really, really well. That way you can tell pretty reliably if that's a fake ID or not. What comes into question or concern is when you're presented with an out-of-state ID that you're not familiar with. And in those cases, it is good to have a couple of things in your bag. One is a current ID checking book that has pictures and all of those indicators in that book for each state. I think the NNA sells one of these on their website. And two is a little UV flashlight that you can pass over it and look for some of those identifiers. Some of them are only visible under UV light that would help you distinguish whether or not that is a real ID or a fake ID. However, I will say that you could be the ID checking expert, and there might be a 1 in a million fake IDs that makes it through. So, we are human. No one's going to ever be perfect, but you certainly can be better prepared than not at all. So those are my suggestions. What do you do, Jen?
I use the Notary e-journal. The scanning barcode on the back is an excellent indicator, and Jen will put that link in the chat for you guys if you want to look at the Notary e-journal. It has a scanner on the back that if something is fraudulent, it's not going to upload the information for you. I also use the ID book. That ID book updates yearly, so you need to get a yearly copy. Please don't use one from 10 years ago that someone passes off to you, because these change all the time. The small black light is very important, but the most important thing, I think, Lupita, is to make sure you're checking the things that your state requires you to check. Make sure you're looking at those in good faith and understand that there's not one person on the planet that can catch all the fraudulent IDs out there. As long as you can show you've done your job, then that's what is important. And I have 4 children, all of whom, well, now 3 of them are over 21, but before they turned 21, they all decided that they were going to go to downtown Dallas and get fake IDs so they could sneak in the bars. I'm sure you have familiarity with this if you have teenage children or you know some, right? This is what they do. And let me tell you something, those IDs that they get that they pay $150 for, that's it, are damn good. So Lupita, there's all you can do is all you can do, you know? There is no, that I'm aware of, machine or technology that you can scan that ID and say it's real or fake.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. But that's a great question. And it's important to know that there are so many options for people to get fake IDs out there. And they do look really good. They look really good. Before we get to our next question, we only have a few minutes left. I want to remind you guys, if you are a newer notary and you need some hand-holding because you cannot figure out how to get out of your own head and get out of your way and grow your business and your brand in your community, please go check out marketingfornotaries.com. It is a monthly subscription service where I teach you the 5-point marketing system that will help you build your brand in your community and get the word out about your notary business. But we are currently also offering videos that you can stream, which means you can buy it and stream it forever, or you can now rent it for anywhere from $7.99 to $10.99 a video. We just launched 3 videos. You need a few of these. The first one you need is the universal selling proposition. Anybody know what that is? Throw it to me in the chat if you know what a universal selling proposition is. It's your elevator pitch. It's your elevator pitch. And everybody needs one of those so they can tell people what they do when they are asked. And you can either buy it for $44.99 and have it forever, or you can rent it for $10.99 and have it for 24 hours. So, and I walk you through step by step how to write your elevator pitch. Just go to marketingfornotaries.com/shop and you can check that out. There's a few other cool marketing things on there that you can purchase for your business too. Cassandra Burton in DC, what is your question for us?
Hi, I've been taking pictures of the ID of the signers in loan signing packages and then uploading them to the like signing orders portal. And I don't know, and then all of a sudden I'm beginning to feel like I don't should not be doing that. These companies say you won't get paid if you don't, upload the ID. And I don't know. I just feel like it's all of a sudden, I'm like, they're on my phone. And then I have to rush and delete them because I don't want these people's ID on my phone. And then they have to be scanned. I'm whining a little bit, but I just want to know, are people doing this? How do you get around this? Or so that's
I think a lot of people are doing it, Cassandra, and I think it's very telling about the level of care the title companies, signing services have about people's personal data and information, which is very little. Matt, how do you handle uploading IDs? My solution, Cassandra, just so you know, I try to tell the people to make a copy of their photo IDs and bring it with them to closing. So that way it's not going, and I tell them exactly why. So it doesn't go from my phone to an auto upload unprotected. And I've never had anybody complain about that.
Yeah, I either ask them to make a copy that I can ship back with the documents, or I ask the clients to send them directly to the title company because, Cassandra, you're right. We don't want these images on our phones. And further, once you transmit that image, you're now responsible for it. So if anything should happen, it's going to come right back to you. And then one other thing I want to mention for notaries, which is not often talked about, is you should never take a picture of a military ID. That's federal law. So don't ever take a picture of a military ID.
Thanks for that reminder, Matt. Absolutely. And check your state laws, because not every state allows pictures to be uploaded of driver's licenses. So you've got to look at those laws and work with the signing company. Guys, we are at the end of our call. Linda, please bring your question back next week, or you can fill out the form at notarycoach.com/TNT so you don't forget it. And we will get your answer to you next week. I want to thank Matt Miller with the California League of Independent Notaries for being my co-host today. I always love sharing time with Matt. Matt, thank you so much. You're welcome. It was Fraud Tuesday today, wasn't it? It was all about fraud today. I always appreciate your expertise. And guys, I highly encourage all of you, whether you're in California or not, to find out more information about how the California League of Independent Notaries can help you in your state, because it's not just for California notaries. All right, guys, we will see you next week, possibly going live on YouTube. I don't know. We'll find out. Look for an email because it'll have a new link. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.